We have Tinsir, Otto, Leomund, Mordenkainen, Bigby. All of these wizards who had the insight and the knowledge of the arcane arts to craft a spell that bears their name to this day. They are special spellcasters, but why can't your character be special? Let's talk about that. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Geek Pantheon. I am Eric, and today we're talking about customizing magic. And I mean in a very in-character way, not a metatextual way. If you have a pyromaniac monster that you want to deal cold damage, just say it deals cold damage and describe things differently. That's easy. I'm talking about what if you have a player character, or you are a player and you want your character to be able to create a brand new spell? And how can we approach that in a way that is fun, engaging, and balanced? And this was inspired by the Cleric Corner, Riker, who put out this video, Artificers Don't Belong in D&D 5th Edition. Riker, I invited you into my home, this channel. You were on a video, link up there. I welcomed you into my Eberron-loving house, and you do this to me, claiming that artificers don't belong in 5th edition? Are you crazy? They are a wonderful class. The wizards needed another class that used intelligence as a primary ability mod. I'm going to take some breaths. Riker, I understand what you're saying. And in actuality, the video is great. Go check it out. Riker really didn't roast on artificers that much. He basically talked about the fact that their rules for crafting things against the common rules, or the general rules for crafting in D&D 5th edition, don't mesh that well, which, yeah, I agree. I don't think that's an issue, but something that he talked about in his video that really struck a chord with me is the fact that artificers can recreate magic items. That's one of the big things that they do, but they can't create magic items. They can't create brand new things that don't exist in the system, rules as written, to create something brand new, which, yeah, I agree. That's something that is missing from the rules. But not wanting to just expand on his idea, I kind of went to, what about magic spells? Because we have all of these name spells, and presumably, especially once a character gets above a 16 or 18 intelligence score, and they're a spellcaster, surely they would be able to figure out magic in a way to where they can create their own spells. So I've taken a look at Xanathar's Guide to Everything, specifically the downtime rules for creating magic items, and then also the rules for scribing spell scrolls. I looked at those two things and wanted to think about how could I marry those two things to where a player character during their downtime could create a brand new spell. And I think I've come up with an interesting system. So first off, requirements. Who can do it? So I'm going to say for my system that, casting magic is based on a variety of ability scores: charisma, wisdom, or intelligence. Obviously, wizards, artificers are intelligence-based. And what I'm going to say is that a spellcasting character can craft spells up to a level of the spell that they can cast. Okay? That is a blanket. If you can cast third level spells, you're familiar enough with spellcasting to where you can figure out how to modify spells. That's what we're doing. Or a player character can modify spells and create spells of a level of their ability modifier times 2. Okay? That doesn't mean they can cast them. If you out of the gate have a +4 intelligence modifier, sure, you can modify a level 8 spell. You're smart enough academically to figure out how to take a spell like Sunburst that deals 12d6 radiant damage and go, I wonder if I can make a large bursting ball of acid that deals 12d6 acid damage. And what if we tried to modify the other conditions of it or something like that? You could academically figure that out. You can't do anything with it. You could present it to another wizard and go, hey, I think I figured out how to make this spell. And if they're a crazy high level wizard, they could maybe then go across the finish line for you and be like, yeah, I could cast this. And that's what you can do. So those are the rules, the requirements for being able to do this. Either spell that you can cast, a spell level that you can cast, or your intelligence modifier times 2 is the spell level. So the smartest of the smart, 20th level intelligence, yes, you can figure out how to tweak with things like Meteor Storm. So that allows for non-spellcasters to be able to get in on the fun of this, which is something that I wanted to incorporate, because you can have incredibly intelligent characters like a mastermind rogue that could turn it into a business. They create brand new spells. They could take commissions from other wizards of like, I cast Ray of Frost a lot, but my whole deal is really more poison. So if I get a ray of poison, that'd be cool. And your rogue's like, cool, give me some time. I'll come up with something, deliver it to you. There you go. And before we get into the actual kind of mechanics of actually doing it, if you're enjoying this video, if you're enjoying this concept, be sure to give the video a like and subscribe to the channel. We do a lot of videos like this. We also do more like specific like subclass deep dives or long form discussions like we had with Legal Kimchi, who joined us on the channel, about using Cold Wars as inspiration for your D&D campaign. So be sure to subscribe and comment down below if you think that my requirements out of the gate are broken or wouldn't work. Once again, none of this has been play tested, so keep that in mind. We also have a Patreon, patreon.com/thegeekpantheon. If you want to financially support the channel, that is the place to do it. And yeah, go check it out. Okay, so first and foremost, what we're looking at when we're coming up with how to actually do this is the Scribing Spell Scrolls table in Xanathar's Guide to Everything, page 133, for those of you that have the physical books. I'm using the one that came in the Multiverse Monster pack, so if the page numbers are different, then just look it up. There's an index. So this table down here shows the cost of creating a spell scroll and the amount of time that it takes to create that spell scroll. So, cost 15 gold pieces for a cantrip, 25 for first level, so on and so forth. And then additionally, 1 day for cantrip and first level spells, 3 days for second, yada, yada, yada. So we're using this as our initial point of inspiration. But I would argue that like experimenting and tinkering and tweaking with a spell is going to take more time than just scribing a spell scroll with an established spell that we know already works. So we go to the Creating Magic Items page, which is just 2 pages before, or 2 page turns, 129, and we have the rules for crafting magic items. And one thing it talks about, or just crafting items in general, one thing it talks about is the cost of crafting the item being the cost of the item divided by 50 gold pieces. That's too much of a division in this case because, like I said, the spell scrolls are only start at 15 gold pieces. So essentially you're looking at like a silver for creating a brand new cantrip. So the thing that I will say in terms of cost is we're still going to take the cost amount here for scribing a spell scroll, but we're going to divide it by 5. So 3 gold pieces for a cantrip, 5 for a first level, and then 50 for a second level, so on and so forth, all the way up to that's going to be 50,000 gold pieces for a 9th level spell. Pricey. But the other additional cost is, I'm going to say, the spell that you're starting off with, like the base of inspiration, because we talked about like, what if we took Ray of Frost and made it a Ray of Poison? You have to have the materials, specifically materials that cost money, because if you have a component pouch, then, the rules say you are regarded as having the components for all spells except the ones that carry a monetary value. So that's an additional cost, is if you're trying to somehow modify the Identify spell into something adjacent to what it does, you need that pearl. Or if you're trying to manipulate one of the many resurrection spells that have something that costs a lot of money, you have to have that material. That makes sense from an in-world standpoint and from a balance standpoint, that you're tweaking with a spell, so you need to be able to carry the material costs of it in order to actually, do testing. So that's my thought process on that. And now from a time standpoint, so we have 1 day, 3 days, 1 work week once you get up to 3rd level. Too short a time. Once again, we're talking about taking a spell and tinkering with it, experimenting with it, casting it over and over and over until you finally get it locked in and doing exactly what you want to do. So for this, I'm going to take a Fibonacci sequence as a point of inspiration, to where we start off with a cantrip taking 1 week. First level spell takes 2 weeks. Second level takes 3. Third level takes 5. Fourth level takes 8. So on and so forth, all the way up and up and up, where you just basically you add the previous 2 amounts together to create the new amount. So like I said, 8th for 4th level, 5 for 3rd level. So 5th level would be 13, since 8 plus 5 equals 13, and then 21, and then so on and so forth. And this creates a good scale in terms of the power level of it. And, modifying a 9th level spell should take almost 2 years. Like, that's a lot of power that you're tinkering with. And it should be played as like, yeah, the consequences of screwing up while you're tinkering around with Meteor Storm is a lot greater than tinkering around with Identify. So that's, you move at a slower pace when you're tinkering with higher level spells, is also what's reflected in that time. So that's what I'm thinking for the actual time progression and how long it takes, how much. And obviously it's not a straight through like any downtime activity. It is total labor hours invested in this. So, just, you can ask your DM how much downtime we're going to have, and they're like 2 weeks. And you can just, okay, I'm going to spend those 2 weeks working on my 8th level spell that I'm trying to modify, or create rather. And then you can take those 2 off and you continue on your way. And there is a way to where I feel like you could work with your dungeon master to try and come up with like a brand new spell. Or if you find a really cool homebrew spell that the DM doesn't want to just drop into the setting, you all can work together to figure out monetary cost, what appropriate level it would be at, things like that, if you're just trying to create something brand new. For my mind, it's much easier to just look at all of the spells in D&D 5th edition and, figure out how you could modify them to A, do a different damage type or have a different effect, or B, modulate the level of the spell by increasing its power. A lot of them have cast at a higher level, but if you want to take something like Slow, for example, which allows you to pick up to 6 creatures that you can choose, and let's say you want to talk to your demon and be like, okay, that's a 3rd level spell. What if I tried to make a 2nd level or 1st level version that's a single target spell? Like, what if I tried to do that? How much time investment would that take? Because obviously now we're talking about switching spell level. So you're starting with a 3rd level spell, but you're trying to get down to a 1st level. So do we use the work weeks based off of the spell that we're starting with or the spell that we're creating? For me, I would rule it as the spell that we're creating, because the amount of effort relates to the final effect. We already know how to cast the slow spell just in world in general. So it's more about like taking what we know, that knowledge we know, which takes 6 seconds to cast, and reducing it, focusing it, honing in, that kind of thing. So, or if you don't want to change the spell level, it's like, okay, I want to hyper concentrate the slow spell so that now instead of a -2 to AC, they get disadvantage or advantage on any attacks against them, or a -5 to their AC. And you just look at all the other effects and see how you can tweak them. So this is very much a back and forth with your dungeon master, or if you're a DM with your player, about, okay, you want a spell that can do this, here's how we get there. So I'm trying to incorporate some hard and fast rules and mechanics for it, but something like this does require conversations at the table or away from the table between the participants in order to figure out exactly how to get the desired end goal. So let's put this into practice. I talked about, the spellcaster coming to the rogue and be like, I'm casting Ray of Frost, but my deal is more poison based. That's kind of the theme I'm going for. So I would really like a Ray of Poison as a cantrip that I can cast. So we're going to take a look at Ray of Frost and Poison Spray just as our 2 points of inspiration, since, one of those is the Ray part and the second one is the poison part. So Ray of Frost, it is an attack spell. So you roll an attack against your target, and if it hits, you deal 1d8 cold damage and their speed is reduced by 10. And then obviously with cantrips, as you level, they become more and more powerful. Poison Spray is a saving throw cantrip. So it deals 1d12 poison damage, so more damage, but it is a constitution saving throw, which we can get into the math of, well, we're not going to, because I don't want to get into the math of like why saving throws can deal more damage, yada, yada, yada. Our goal is to create Ray of Poison. So what we want to do is we want to convert the 1d8 of damage from cold to poison damage, and we want to have some kind of effect that affects the target, like the reducing its speed by 10 feet. It's important here to recognize and look at the balance and what wizards did with creating the spell. The Ray of Frost spell does not impose a condition. And so just taking the idea of like, yeah, it deals poison damage and they're poisoned until the start of the next turn, that's too much. in my opinion. Having a cantrip that can impose disadvantage on attack rolls and ability checks, yeah, that's too much power for a cantrip, in my opinion. Not even poison spray poisons the target. So we look at something like reducing their speed by 10 feet. And so it's something that affects their ability to be effective in combat, but does not hinder their ability to do things in combat. So that's the balance that we're trying to strike. And so when I was thinking about this and thinking about, okay, as a DM or as a player, when I'm looking at this, what interesting thing could I incorporate that's A, not breaking the game, and B, is thematically appropriate for like shooting a ray of poison at somebody. And what I came up with was until the start of your next turn, the target, when they hit, takes 1d8 poison damage and can't take the dash action until the start of your next turn. The idea being that, you know, you've sprayed their face with poison and it's noxious and they're breathing it in, so they can't get full breath, so they can't sprint, they can't dash. And so generally speaking, in most combat scenarios, going to mean nothing, going to be less valuable than Ray of Frost just reducing the speed by 10 feet. But if it's a chase sequence, or, you know, if it's just a monster trying to get away from the combat, then it becomes, you're so happy that you have it. You're like, yes, finally, I did it. I came up with a spell that is meaningfully impactful in a combat scenario. And that's what you want from a cantrip, is an effect that isn't going to blow the doors off anything, but when the moment comes, it's just, yes, this is great. So that's kind of what I came up with. Ray of Poison. It's exactly like Ray of Frost, except poison damage, and the target can't take the dash action until starting your next turn. So what do you all think? Is this an interesting idea? Did you like it? Do you think that I really beefed it with the mechanics of it? Let me know down below. I'm eager to see what people think down in the comments. So yeah, let me know down there. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. Thank you all so much for watching. I've been Eric, and I will see you next time.